It's the workshop meeting for Monday, January 25th. And the first item of, well, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Since it's a workshop meeting, we don't have to take roll, but I will note that all board members are present. Sandy is virtual, but she is here with us. So the first item is the 21-22 kindergarten planning, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Evenson.
Good evening, Chair Polly, members of the board. Tonight we have Melissa Barnett and team. We have Amy Hafman and Kat Pass here to talk to you about our planning and work moving forward with kindergarten registration. And one of the things I'll note is that this is one of the first fun projects that I was able to participate in when I started my role here in Jordan, is taking a look at our kindergarten registration and our process, and our team does a really nice job. So tonight they will share that process and look for input and feedback.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. Thank you so much for having me come to share all about our kindergarten programming. I think what's really fun is when you do a presentation like this, you can't help but reflect and just make sure that everything you're possibly doing for our students and our families is the best of the best. So as we've been putting this presentation together, I want to first thank Amy and Kat and Hope for all of their help, along with Superintendent Evenson, with regards to putting all of the information in this together. The intent of this is to explain our process and how we go about registering for kindergarten. So as we go through the slides, I might ask Amy or Kat to help share some more information that is in their area of expertise. So I'll just start off by talking about how we go about identifying kindergartners for our program. This is pretty common in most districts where we have a child find, a census that is really generated by Hope, Jenna Wendorf, our preschool coordinator, Chad Williams, to be able to just make sure that we are identifying those students who can meet the age requirements going into kindergarten. From that, we do a lot of spreadsheets and data to be able to just cross-reference things, such as what do we have from our child find, what do we know about our current preschool enrollment and who's attending those programs, what do we need to keep in mind when we have our non-public, St. John the Baptist, in mind as far as where our students potentially could land. So when we have all of that data, it's also then good for us to keep in mind that this is just in the moment data. And we know that a lot of times what happens is people move, people come and go, people have different choices they make for where they want to send their children. So even though we collect all of this data and we have this census information, doesn't always mean that's what we would expect for all of our students entering into kindergarten. So when we look at some historical trends and being able to see where we've landed for projected enrollment and then where we've landed for actual enrollment, this was information that Amy was able to compile for us moving forward. What's nice is that Hope has been able to collect data over the course of the summer months to also see what the trend data looks over the summer, because that's often when we see the most traffic when it comes to registering for kindergarten, meaning that we start with those projected amounts, yet over the course of our time, roughly from December to August, things happen that then eventually lands on that actual number. So I'll talk a little bit about what happens in between December and August that change and impact some of these numbers. One thing in particular, when you look at perhaps the projected enrollment of 1920 to the actual enrollment, you see a big jump. What sometimes happens is we have families who have children who are 5 years old by September 1st and can enter kindergarten legally. However, for various reasons, they might choose to have their child wait to enter kindergarten. So sometimes that impacts what we have projected and what we see for enrollment. There's actually been a year where we had almost an entire section of kindergarten that those were students and families that decided to wait to send their child to kindergarten that year. So that's somewhat of an anomaly. That doesn't happen very often, yet that's how different those numbers can shift in a given amount of time. The data below just kind of reflects what happened this past year, and being able to just know that we started with the 174 projected, and then when you look at the rest of the numbers, what happened, and which then led us to, if you want to scroll to the next screen, Hope. Oh, I'm sorry. You can go back to the other one. What the bottom says too is just knowing that sometimes even in July or August, those expected numbers don't always register for various reasons. Sometimes it's looking at that no response, like we might send out a mailing and we get it returned because they're no longer living at that address. Or sometimes they decide to open enroll elsewhere. Sometimes, like I said, we don't hear much from families, and all of a sudden then we get new families coming in August that weren't on our list. We had a meeting right prior to this with our curriculum and technology committee, and we were able to have members of our, we had some city officials a part of that as parents, and we talked about how even our community and housing changes and impacts our enrollment too. So those are all variables that sometimes are out of our control as much as we want to count on those numbers.
Do you want me to ask questions during, or do you want us to ask questions at the end?
You know, maybe ask at the end if that's okay, because then that way we're not going back and forth between people and the presenting, if that's all right.
Quick one.
Sure.
Is the 14 JVA students in that 107 or addition to?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
That was my question as well.
Okay.
Okay, Hope.
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, sure.
Do you anticipate doing JVA next year, even if we don't? Or is that not a question? Is that a question for the end?
Well, I mean, we don't know what the state will require us to do in terms of online, but what I can share right now is in an update you'll get later this week, we have advanced on the steps we are taking in exploring online options for families.
Okay.
So like I said, our timeline typically starts in December as far as planning for kindergarten. And I know that sounds maybe really out of sorts because we haven't even gotten fully into the current school year. However, there's a lot of planning that happens during those months from December till August. So this is where I've been meeting with our kindergarten team, Kat as our communications coordinator, Amy with our finances, and Renee. Unique, to her position, she's also coming at it from some experiences as a former elementary principal, so it's nice to have that lens and perspective. So these are some of the planning topics we've had a chance to discuss. So if you look at in December and January, we are right now, is just a lot of putting things out to the public, first and foremost, to just let them know we're encouraging them to register. And that's newer this year in comparison to years past, and a lot of it's contributed to that online registration format that Stephen and Hope and Kat worked really hard on. So that way we're able to get the communication out early enough and get families to register. So some of the ways we've communicated, our community ed brochure, through social media. Some of the other things, we've targeted those specific families in our census and sent emails to them. Along the way, we've met, like I said, as a kindergarten team and as myself as the building principal, to just talk about what is it that makes Jordan Public Schools a great place to go to school? What is a selling point for our school and for our kindergarten programming? And then all of that information, along with frequently asked questions that we get from families, that often our kindergarten teachers get asked in the fall, or we get asked over the summer. We're going to be compiling a lot of that brainstorming that happened this past month, and Kat will then start pushing it out into different social media blasts that kind of literally count down our way to kindergarten. And our hope is that we can break up the information in small pieces. What we've learned from, I would say, probably the last few years, people really are much more interested in that short burst of information rather than long narratives. There's also more of a preference to video, things that are visually appealing. So we're also structuring some of our communication to reflect that. We still have yet to determine, due to COVID, what's going to happen when we get to that March and April time with having those opportunities for families to come in for those face-to-face events. And a lot of it really is dependent on our current situation. Last year, we had kindergarten roundup planned. I think it was March, like the second week of March, and the week before is when everything shut down. So we had to put a pause on that event. And what happened actually is we had our roundup in May. That was a drive-through kindergarten roundup. And we probably had more one-on-one interaction with families than we had at even our open house type event, where every car that came through got to talk with each individual teacher and myself. So it was really personalized, which I think at that point, that's a really good thing for us to learn from and figure out how do we continue that personalized interaction in whatever format that's going to look like for face-to-face this year. Go ahead, Hope. This is where we have been with our current with our former and current teaching staff. What's important to note is it may look like in 2021 there was a little bit of an outlier piece of data with 15 to 16 in a class, and that was due to our COVID restrictions and also those students that registered for JVA. So we were watching our kindergarten numbers pretty extensively in July and August. And when we got the final plan that we created for our plan here in Jordan, we really did find it beneficial. And really, if we wanted to make everything work in our school, we needed to go to that added section of kindergarten, which brought it to 15 to 16 in a class due to the sizes of the restrictions with social distancing and some of the other things that we were required to follow. This is where we're currently at. And like I said, our census data, when you look at it, is at 180. When you kind of start digging deeper into the data, summer birthdays right now, those are things that sometimes can play into what's going to happen for the fall. We also know that we have families who will prefer to send their children to St. John's. So when we take kind of a good guess, and sometimes, unfortunately, that's what it is. It's a good guess based on trends and based on information we've watched over time. Right now, we're looking at, we probably have about 134 possible kindergarten students. Right now, to this date, we have 58 registered, which is great. At this point in years past, we hadn't really acquired any type of registrations because they were going out to families in paper format. So I think that online registrations made a big impact on our current registration numbers. And for the adopted budget, Amy's landing on a number of right around 100 students. And obviously, that's all dependent on a lot of that variable pieces of data that I mentioned before. And I think, Amy, we typically plan low. So that's just something else to know. As you look here on our communication timeline, it aligns to our planning topics and being able to, like I said, really target and hone in on those smaller pieces of communication that are going out to families. Kat's got a great calendar. I don't know if you want to click on that, Hope. It's up in that top right-hand corner. It's a great visual to see all of the things that have currently been communicated out, as well as things that are coming up. So it's a great tool and a great visual for us to just see. And you may not be able to see all the visuals, but at least it gives you just, here's what's happened so far. So there's that complete designation to it, knowing that as we work our way further down the calendar, some of those things on that timeline now are referenced here. And we'll keep adding to this as we go along. Just a point of noting here, we recently had a chance to speak with the JI, And I think, Kat, you met with them today, is that true? And I talked with them on Friday to make sure that we were continuing to look at all of the avenues and communicating with our families. And sometimes what we're finding is that our kindergarten families aren't always our traditional families where there's, you know, two parents, a mom and a dad, or two guardians. Sometimes our grandparents are now taking care of our kindergarten kiddos. And sometimes we have to figure out, how do we communicate to all of those families? It's not just those families aren't always looking to social media to get their information. Sometimes it's a little bit more traditional, like email and mailings and the art and the newspaper. So we didn't want to lose sight of that group of people. So then as you look through here, the rest of the timeline, once again, a lot of it's social media, but we're also following up with phone calls to families after we have given them that opportunity to register. And that February 15th, it's not a hard deadline. It's not like we're going to shut down registration on the 15th. That is something that will be open, and that will happen throughout the course of the rest of the spring and into the summer. Yet our hope is we can get as many registrations as we can, because we need some of those numbers when we're making staffing decisions on resources for the upcoming year, so that it's aligned more to our budgeting process. These are some specific dates on the events that are occurring. Once again, it's really important to note, these are all dates that are subject to change. And a lot of this, once again, might be out of our control. What we're hoping is that when we get to our springtime and more so into our early summer, that things will settle down with COVID and we can maybe align what we're doing to more of these specific dates. But we want to just be transparent with the community and let them know that these dates right now aren't set in stone. But we also know some families like to plan ahead and just have tentative dates to look at. We're going to continue to offer Kickstart to Kindergarten. This is now, I believe, our 4th year doing this. And I don't know, Molly, I don't know if Peyton was a part. Was she our first group?
Yeah.
Okay, so she's now 2nd grade?
Yep.
Yeah. So we're in our 3rd, 4th year of doing this, and each year we learn from what we've done in the past, and we continue to improve on this. What we found, it's been a great time for just our kindergartners to be in the building, to get attention from all of the adults that are in there without having the added pressure of the big kids on campus, and feeling like they get a chance to just learn the places of the building and scheduling all on their own without that, without all of the other students in there. It's also been very well received from our families, so that they feel like, you know, they can now also meet with their child's teacher, and being able to have those conferences to talk through what their kindergarten teacher saw happen at Kickstart, and their goals and their hopes and dreams for their kiddos. So they talk about a lot of that at the conferences that follow up our Kickstart program. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. I am willing to take questions, comments, offer any other things that you're interested in. I know Amy and Kat are willing to answer anything as well.
I
I'll
noticed
open
on
it
one
up
of
to questions.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Deb. I noticed on a couple slides back when you have kindergarten and 1st grade virtual together. So it's 14 that were kindergarten, and then how many were in 1st grade?
I think there's about 12.
Okay.
So it's a little over 20
Okay.
that are in that one classroom on JVA that one teacher is working with.
Okay, and then I noticed that we're doing some Peach Jar communications. Did you notice an influx after that Peach Jar communication? I was just curious, because I know when I get those Peach Jar emails, it reminds me, hey, go sign up for soccer. I'm hoping to get one. You know, so I was just kind of wondering, did you notice an influx after Peach Jar?
I don't know about Peach Jar specifically, but I do know we had quite an influx after I did, which would maybe be about a week later. I'd have to look at the calendar specifically, but about a week later I did the targeted email where I took the emails that we do have. We don't have emails for everybody in the census data, but what we do have, so I think it was 202 emails. Now that could be mom and dad also, but 202 emails, and that I did a targeted email that was very specific, and that seems to be where we saw the bump.
Perfect.
So that's probably one of the best modes of reaching them at this point. So we'll just keep, Hope has done some extra work and some sleuthing to try to get some more of those emails from the people that we don't have emails from. So that's just something we always try to keep continuing to do during this time frame.
Thank you.
And I do think especially now, like, reaching out via email is super important, because I know a lot of people aren't on social media right now, especially, you know.
that.
There's so much, like, I miss this communication because I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Twitter anymore, I'm not on this anymore, so I think sending out emails is gonna be very important nowadays.
And we actually made phone calls this past year for our current kindergarten families as well. And I think even just that, maybe more of those traditional forms of communication, the email and the phone, we are getting more people, we're able to contact people that way too, that, it's just that concept of social media is always coming at you, and you just sometimes just don't even pay attention, or you just let it go. I know some people are even trying to lessen their amount of exposure to social media. So it's interesting how some of those traditional formats are starting to come back as far as preferences from our families.
I just want to commend all of you for the work that's gone into this, because this is a solid communication plan. I know last year was stressful. Just trying to figure out, obviously with COVID, who was going to show up and who wasn't, and what that was going to do to the budget. So I really appreciate this. A couple of questions I had. I don't know if it's a question or a request, I guess, but so obviously there's a difference between eligible students, projected enrollment, and what we actually have.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious to see, just take it back 5 or 6 years and just be able to see the eligible enrollment to the projected to the actual enrollment, because I'm assuming, other than this last year, there's probably a pretty good correlation, right? And there's probably some pretty good, because obviously part of the eligible, some kids just, they're eligible, but they don't go. They
Yep.
wait another year or something like that. I'm assuming that the district is kind of like a heat map, and we do pretty well in Jordan, and the farther east we go in the townships towards Lakeville, it gets harder and harder. So I'm sure that those are all variables that.
Well,
come
and
into
another
play.
variable that's not on here, Ryan, is that this past year with COVID, we had a unique hybrid in-person model here in Jordan, and that attracted quite a few families from surrounding districts. I heard from several families that open enrolled. I just actually talked with another one today. They chose Jordan because of that model, and they felt that was going to be what was best for their child. So that's a new variable that we didn't have in years past that impacted our numbers. Now, those are all things that moving forward, like to your point, Lauren, if we look at an online component of some sort of learning model, we'll have to continue to see how that may attract either people within our district or outside of our district, because what we're finding in conversation with families, often what attracts them to our district is our programming, our small town, and those big opportunities, our staff and the relationships that they have, the fact that we acknowledge the social emotional learning being just as important as academics. So those are things that we'll continue to highlight, and they find that often on our website. That's sometimes the starting point, so we want to continue. Kat's done a phenomenal job of maintaining our website. That is often where the first place that a family will go when they're kind of shopping around, so to speak.
Do we have an understanding that 1920 stands out as the year where we had almost an entire section that we weren't expecting?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have commentary on why that might have happened?
That's where that piece of, when students are eligible and for whatever reason they don't come in, or if there's an influx in the development in the community, like there's all of a sudden houses going up, or, a development goes up, but then maybe in another development, there's a shift in where the population lands. And so those are things that it'd be interesting to track, like through a survey of some sort of, trying to collect data as to why that happened. I don't know if there's a way to do that. Sometimes it's just by hearing and talking with people and getting their stories. But, that's where that class, that we had, it literally was 20 students. That would have been almost a whole kindergarten classroom that we did not anticipate waiting. Those are the things that 1920, it's an outlier. So you have to figure out, well, why is it an outlier? Is that going to be any more, will that become the norm? Will that become a trend? Or was that just specific for that year? That's why summer birthdays is kind of nice to note. So you can take a look at, that's typically where the holds come, is for children whose birthdays are in the summer.
If you look at the year before, though, if you look at the year before, if you scroll back,
18.
There we were just the reverse, so
Uh-huh.
probably we picked up, 8, 10
Yeah,
kids.
it seems like it's plus or
there that-
minus 20%.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Yep.
Well, and also if we do offer the virtual academy, that's another thing that could be a wild card in
Mhm.
our projections as well.
Mm-hmm.
Could I ask, how are you doing preschool screening?
How is it
Is it-
happening this year?
Yes.
It's still happening, and I know Jenna Wendorf and I have talked about that. Rachel Volbrick is the one who organizes that all at the preschool level. I know that they just had conferences for preschool, and they're going to be starting registration soon. So they're pushing that communication out to families. I don't know specifically what screening looks like in a virtual world. Just knowing
'Cause
that.
that might give you some hands-on numbers.
Yep, so right now preschool screening is done on your own. So you still sign up for your time, just like you would have before COVID. So you go onto the website, sign up for your slot, and then you'll get the paperwork from Katie Anderson. And you'll fill out all the forms, any sort of like screenings that you've had, at your doctor or anything like that, send it back. And then they'll go through it and then be in contact with you if there are questions, or like I requested specific like speech things for my son, like contacting back on that. So it is done more asynchronously. It's not on site right now.
But to your point, that does give us valuable information. I know this last August, when there was a list of maybe 15, 20 students that we still were waiting to hear from, Jenna Wendorf and team were a great link for us. And almost to a student, they were like, yep, they are definitely enrolling. And they're pretty accurate with that.
The other thing is, in a COVID year, typically by October 1st is when the state requires us to have immunizations completed for our current kindergartners, as well as preschool screening completed. This year with COVID and all of the things happening in clinics and whatnot, that due date shifted to February 1st. So we are still having a few families that I've been in touch with now that we've sent communications with over the course of this year, that we haven't had to really hold accountable to the letter of the law until February 1st. And that's typically something that's done way back in October. So those are all things that a COVID year will do too, that we would typically have families that we say, the deadline's October 1st. We would prefer it to happen before September 1st. And we do catch some of those kiddos that enroll in kindergarten in that first month, and Jenna will work with the kindergarten teachers to pull those kiddos, bring them down to the preschool wing of the building to do the screening on site, because we don't want it to be where it's a hardship or there's some inequities as far as why families can't do those screenings.
Do you think we'll have a harder time identifying students that'll need special services?
We've been talking a lot about that, just I think district-wide, and the impact COVID will have on learning. And it's not just here, it's nationwide. As far as students who could potentially need support, what's a challenge is that even though the learning has looked different and the teaching has obviously looked different as well, some of the guidelines and protocols that we're held accountable for at the state and federal level have not changed. So the criteria to meet for special services and other programmings haven't followed the COVID trend as far as acknowledging where kids are at, and we know that they're probably not where they could be just because of the learning model. So that'll be hard. It'll be, I don't know, Aaron, we've had that disclaimer on report cards now that, that it can't be on or something with the transcript just reflecting distance learning and things like that. That's going to be a domino effect, I think, for some time.
For sure.
This is a really good tool. It seems to me if you guys think about this as a funnel, and you have eligible, probable, projected is basically Amy's budget, right? And then to the actual enrollment. I think if you look at that over a long enough period of time, you'll get some pretty reliable.
Well, and then we typically have, is it Hazel Reinhardt? Is that the
She's the retired,
demographer?
yeah.
You know, those are also things that as we look at trend data in our community, that's important to look at too, because that came up in our last meeting, is, you know, maybe another reason why, you know, the number now is what, 184, 186, I can't remember, as far as, you know, looking at eligible or potential students. 180. That is higher than in years past, and we are now potentially seeing, you know, it was that, I guess they call them the recession babies, where there were families when the recession hit that chose to not have as many children. So we kind of saw a dip in enrollment there for a while in our kindergarten numbers, and perhaps now we're going to see an uptick back in that as a recovery from that recessional time.
I think too, I mean, some of the other variables are how quickly is the eastern part of the district growing, right? I mean, because that could be skewing your numbers.
Any other questions?
Very helpful. Looks
Thanks for the
good.
feedback.
Yeah. Good, thank you, Melissa. Okay, middle school transition planning. Mr. Bakeberg.
So I would just remind myself to talk up here. I wanted to just give you an overview, just in conjunction with Melissa sharing about the elementary. I thought it'd be fitting to talk about some of the middle school pieces as well. So I won't walk through the presentation for you, but basically just to kind of give you an overview, and you know, Sarah, you guys just went through this. Ryan, you guys just went through this. But so we do, in the spring of the year, we do a transition night. It's an open house night, and we intentionally call it a new families night because we don't want to just pigeonhole just our incoming fifth grade families, because we want to be cognizant of our students coming from St. John's. And then we also, in years recently, have used it as an opportunity for families that are interested in the middle school or interested in the Jordan schools to come and hear about the district. So the kind of a general overview of the night is you know, you can see it here, but we do just a building overview, and everyone is in there. So whether they're coming from St. John's or whether they're coming from the elementary or they're a new family, regardless of their age, everyone is in there for that general overview. And we walk through kind of just the general pieces of the building. We talk a lot about as a fifth grader because that's the bulk of the audience, but then we weave in the specific pieces as well. And then we have a parent panel where it's kind of a question and answer time where there's 4 or 5 parents, and we talk through just the ins and outs of the middle school. And that's been a really nice feature because, I mean, I can say all kinds of things, but it's just me talking and selling. But when a parent is saying, you know, this has been my experience, it's been a really nice, powerful perspective. The 2 best parts of the nights are when we have students share. So we work with about 5 students, current 5th grade students, and we really try to get a broad spectrum of the type of student that's presenting. So we're not going to get all of our just high flyer students. We want to get a representation, and they share their perspective on the middle school, and we work with them. And we practice it, and we put them on the stage, and they speak, and hands down, that's the best part of the night when they share. And then really through this, what we're trying to do is grow leaders and give kids opportunities to step up and lead. So then we have about 20 different other students that are tour guides for the night. So we break everyone out, and then those 20 students, Kat has done an amazing job of laying out the middle school on a tour. So we have different stops throughout the building. We have scripts for them when they get nervous that they can look back at that script. but then they lead their future classmates on a tour of the middle school building. And it's crazy, you know, they're all over, but it's a great night. And then we talk about registration and those other nuts and bolts pieces that we need so that we can plan accordingly. You can clip through Hope if you want, and I can touch on things, but really the purpose of the night is to, before families really start to get anxious and start asking questions about the middle school or this, that they're getting that information in a proactive way. They're hearing from us as a staff, they're hearing from other parents, and they're hearing from kids. You know, and these are just different overview pieces that we're walking through. We will do it most often. We've done it right after spring break, right around that time frame. So families typically, what we found is everyone's planning for their spring break trip, so people aren't thinking about the next school year. And then they get back and they're like, all right, we got to finish this year. Oh, what about next year? What does that mean? So then they have that information in a proactive manner. The other piece that we weave in and we talk about is web. And especially for Sarah and Molly, web is it's our 8th grade students, and they go through an application process and apply to be web leaders, and they are mentoring our 5th grade students throughout the course of the year. Now we started this last year, 2 years ago, so we've never had a full school year where the students have benefited from web because of COVID, but we're still continuing to provide different opportunities. Jumpstart Day, our web leaders are intricately involved in our Jumpstart Day. In the morning is all kind of the nuts and bolts, the traditional Jumpstart for those of you that have older students, and then the afternoon is our, actually vice versa. It's the web is in the morning, and then the Jumpstart Day is in the afternoon. So it's really just an opportunity for families to get to know and get some ideas and to put some dates on the calendar. I hope that we can have our resource night. You know, Superintendent Evenson didn't get a chance to experience this. This is probably my favorite night of the year. You know, we've done away with the traditional open house night. We're all very busy. Families are very busy. And someone said, it's like a party here. And they didn't mean it as a compliment, but I took it as a compliment. And it's a fun night, and kids walk out and they're excited. We have food trucks and there's music, and they get the questions answered at the start of the night. So we try to give families a little taste of what that might look like when they come. Obviously the date hasn't been set, and you know, this year the plan was for the middle and high school to do it together. The food trucks were going to be out in this lot, and then COVID happened. So, but yeah, so you know, and the rest of it, if you have specific questions, I can certainly answer, but hope you can keep scrolling through. So yeah, we'll continue. Our hope is that we're going to be able to do it on site to get people in the building, but we'll just adjust and go from there. I think one of the takeaways though is that we'll always have a virtual option for people, and we'll record it for people that aren't able to be there. And you know, the speaker that we recently had that our counselors organized, you know, I was putting my 2nd grader to bed and I had earbuds in and I was listening to it. So, you know, I think just families with young kids, varying ages, it's a great way to have that. So, and we'll always have those options. I would just take questions or open up for questions.
What does WEB stand for?
Where everyone belongs. Great question. It's part of the Boomerang Project, if you've heard of that. Link Crew is the high school version of it.
I just think this is great. It's so welcoming and inviting and puts parents and kids at ease. So thank you for organizing that.
Yeah, the staff do a great job of it. So, yeah, well, thank you.
Great,
Thank
thanks very much, Mr. Woodward. Anything else on any of that? Okay, then the last item we have, we're gonna have a short meeting tonight. Typically what we do after the MSBA Leadership Conference, we're all kind of on a high. But this year, because it's spread out over 3 weeks, I thought it would be a good idea if we would share some of our takeaways before we get too far away from it and forget, what we took in. So we'll cover the first 2 weeks of the conference tonight, and then at the February meeting, we can cover the last one. So I will open it up to whoever wants to start sharing any of their takeaways. It looks like Connie has some notes there.
Some random notes. I didn't know we were
I
gonna.
love when Connie gives feedback because she is
Well,
so
my favorite
excited.
one, Erin, was a video that I watched of a health teacher, a male health teacher from, it was a school that starts with a J. I'm not sure what school it was, Jamestown, I don't know where. But he decided the kids should learn about healthy eating. And he connected with the food service director, and she became the expert, and it turned out to be predominantly boys in this class that went into work in food service, and they did everything. They pulled an agronomist in to learn how to grow the food, and those boys had those little old lunch ladies eating out of the palm of their hand by the end of this whole thing. They planned menus. One of the things they did was made, one of the boys said, how come we never have baked sweet potatoes? And the one lady in the food service said, I've never had one. So he baked sweet potatoes at home, brought them in, served these ladies. It's the hit of the thing on the menus now that, the kids took ownership in it. And it was all because this health teacher wanted the kids to learn why you should eat healthy, and the kids took over the whole program, and that was a cool, of course, it's egg-related, so I would love it. So that was a big hit for me. I watched the Baker Tilly, Mike Redmond doing targeted structure for operating levy or referendum, and I'm always amazed with the data that they can come up that we could target this group of people to get them to come and vote, and they can predict the timing and the turnout, what target parents, who are terrible voters, who to engage with, and the bottom line always comes back is don't worry about the naysayers, worry about the parents of the kids that go to the school. Because if the parents of the kids that go to the school turn out, they can outvote the 60 to 75-year-old voters. And that always just amazes me. I'm always amazed with the data that they come up with. So just because I know that might be something that's in our background coming forward, that was interesting, and I know that we've looked at that numerous times, and we'll probably be looking at it in the near future. So that was, I did do one more, but I can't remember where the notes are for that one. But it still isn't the same as being there.
No, it's not the same as.
I mean, it's good. I sat in on the vote for Christy, for our region person, so that was really good. I'm glad that we have somebody that's really excited to take that.
She does a very good job.
Yep. So that's what I got so far.
Great. Who wants to go next?
I did watch that agricultural one too, and I thought that was really awesome that they got the food director on board and the kids just like went in and cooked lunch every day for the whole school. And I think it just takes, back to we need to be home cooking our meals, it's so much healthier, and just getting the kids invested in that. And the trades one, I watched the trades video too, where I was talking about I actually have it here, just like how important the trades are, like bringing those back to the school systems. And I know we used to have that here, VOTEC. I don't know if they still have that through the high school program where they go to Chaska and all that stuff. And so, yeah, that was a really interesting one to watch too. So.
I did that one as well.
Yeah.
Good. Sarah?
Yeah, no, I mean, the keynote the first day on diversity and inclusion, she just knocked it out of the park. That was so amazing to watch. So just when she talked about, TRI, transparency, and, inquiry, it talked about empathy and all of that, intercultural competence. So I got a lot out of that one. And then I just did also, being new, a lot of the rules, the Roberts rules, just really understanding, how do you introduce a motion, amendments, all of that, just more of the technical stuff of what we do. I got a lot out of that. And I also joined a couple of the ones, I did the strategic planning during challenging times, and kind of how shifting your mindsets and how to look at things differently. So that's what I got out of this. But I wanted to make sure, to do a couple of those COVID-related items as well.
Good. Yeah, the strategic planning one will probably come in really handy when we have our board retreats.
Yep.
That'll be on the agenda. So, great, good. Lauren?
I wasn't able to attend that day. The Thursdays are my meeting back-to-back days, so.
Ryan?
That's my takeaway too, is that being in person and being captive is key. I feel a little bit like the 10th grader who didn't do his reading assignment today. But it's just tough. I mean, to do anything, I'm even looking at the negotiation sessions and it's like, yep, it's the evening, just because it's so tough to
One thing with the past 2 weeks and with the upcoming week though, all of the workshops and the keynote speaker and the breakout sessions are all recorded, like this afternoon. I had today I had 3 of them on at work in the background, so I got to take in a whole bunch of them. So the ones there's some really good ones from last week that I'll talk about. They're gonna be gone tomorrow night because then they're clearing it out for YouTube for the upcoming Thursday. So Sandy, are you able to talk now or?
Yes, I am. Yes, my youngest.
We should preface. You should tell them why I said that to you.
Well, my youngest this afternoon that is in the one act play, and they're all doing it all virtual, and they were recording from home. And so I was told I was not to make a noise. So I attended the curriculum committee with headphones on, and I'm like typing in the chat if I had needed to. So I can talk now. Yes, they're done. So hopefully it'll be submitted and okay. So yes, I can talk. Honestly, I mean, I did a lot. I did the parliamentary procedure one, even though this is like my 11th year on the board. But I always think it's a good review. Just to kind of refresh my mind about that. I also did this school board self-evaluation because knowing that we have 2 new board members coming on and all of that, it was interesting because I know we tried to do it a few years ago and we didn't pay for it. We just did the free part and it wasn't worth it because we really we couldn't tie the questions and the answers together. And so I don't know. I mean, it's certainly something that, in a year where we've had to make a lot of cuts, I don't know that that's going to be a wise option, but it is something that I think we should be looking at some point. Just because as we have new members, I think it's good to be reflective and to evaluate how we're doing as a board. So, but with brand new members, I think it's maybe next summer might be a good idea to do. I also attended, which other ones did I do? I did the one on student speech because, well, I've been a part of the policy committee for a very long time, and we've had numerous discussions about that. It was really kind of a review because it was a lot about Tinker, which Mr. Helgerson always was referencing, just about having to have something that you can predict would be disruptive. If that you can only limit that in that regard. And then I did a return to learn in times of COVID, which I don't know, that wasn't as valuable to me. And then the last one, I did a lot of legal ones, I feel like. I also did one on recent legal developments regarding transgender rights in the school setting, but that was a review for me. So I'd like to go online, and then thank you for the reminder, Deb, because I want to look at some of the other ones before they go off tonight or tomorrow night.
Yeah, I thought there was, especially this past weeks, I had a hard time choosing because there were so many that I really felt applicable. So.
And I guess the thing for me is that I felt it was really a lot harder to engage because, I mean, I feel like the presenters really did they did a good job of like trying to give us a ton of information in a short amount of time. But the problem is that most of mine ran out of time, like for questions. So it really wasn't very interactive. And that's the part of the conference that I value the most, is hearing all those questions, interacting with other people, and, just talking to other people, like at delegate assembly, like people I know from delegate assembly and all of that kind of stuff. So that piece has been really hard.
Right.
So-
Hopefully next year we'll be back in person.
Yeah.
So I know, I agree with you, even like the Christian Schaefer one, the Ratwig, Rosegg, and Maloney one, that we both did that one on the, freedom of speech thing. I know he ran out of time, because I know there was a lot of good questions that people would have had for that one, so I agree.
Yes, that was my thing with that, is like, I had some questions. But, because I knew a lot of the information you presented, because I've been to that before, and because Mr. Helgerson talked about it so much. So, and I was like, but I still have some questions. But yeah, I think that's the most valuable part, is hearing other schools' experiences and how they deal with things. And that's been lacking. And it's nobody's fault. I mean, it's just how it is.
Right.
But that's, I think, to me, been the hardest part.
Great. Anything else, Sandy? Okay, great, thank you. Well, I'm going to start by saying that I thought the Aiken High School choral group and handbell group, that presentation at the very beginning was phenomenal. The choreography that high school choral director did was mind-blowing. I mean, it was like unbelievable. So I thought, to kick it off, that was really great. Just like you, Sarah, I really enjoyed Phyllis Braxton Frierson. I thought her message was very well delivered, and just a powerful, powerful message. Lunch and Learn, we had with Commissioner of Ed, Mary Catherine Rickert, so she updated us on the MDD front. And then I attended the goals-based superintendent evaluation piece, and that's something that we'll be working on. Superintendent Evenson and I have talked, and she's going to come up with a couple of goals. I recommend that we set 2 to 3 goals for superintendent evaluation, and then after her and I confer, then we'll bring it to the board table and we'll work on that, and then we'll probably be doing the superintendent early summer like we typically do. So, and then like Sandy, I attended the Kids Say the Darndest Things regarding freedom of free speech and stuff, legal session. I attended the board super relations. Gary Lee led that, and Deb Henton, she's the executive director of MASSA. A lot of that was redundancy with the superintendent evaluation. They did a very nice job, but they overlapped a lot, and they reinforced the same things, so that was good. Lunch and Learn was with Eric Martins from the high school league, and that was jam-packed. I don't think they could have had any more people in on that. So that was, he did a great job of really explaining how the league works, which is a very complex, humongous organization. And their whole structure of how they function, I think there's very few districts in the state that even understand it. I mean, the ABs probably do, but he did a great job, and he did a great job of explaining the financial situation they're in and why they're in the situation. I mean, because we haven't been able to have tournaments, of course, which is the big fundraisers or the income source for them. So they are setting up a finance task force that's going to be working through next year to come up with some solutions on the hits that school districts are taking on our fee structure. And there will be, most of the people on that are going to be superintendents. So, yeah, so that'll be interesting to follow along. I listened to the 10 legal lessons COVID-19 taught us, and it was everything from collective bargaining to wages to employee health screenings, truancy, video conferencing issues. And as I watched this, I just have to tell you, I felt so proud of how our superintendent and our district has handled these very situations. I just think you've done a great job. And so that was affirming to me that we're doing a lot of right things here. That was It was pretty eye-opening. And then today I watched Race Stories, which for me personally was very touching. Was with Barb Dorn, if you remember, she was somebody from MSBA that presented on our superintendent search. And then Paula O'Loughlin, you've seen her on the conferencing, talked about their personal stories. Paula is Korean, adopted from Korea, and they talked about their personal stories about their journey in regards to race and equity. So that was, to me, it was very, very touching. Let's see, the one today, Connie, you'll love this, that you've got to watch it if you haven't. It was on agriculture in the classroom, and I know that Erin is gone, but if we're not linked into this, it's through Ag Mag. It's Minnesota Ag in the Classroom. The presenters were a gal whose students go to Eastern Carver County, and the other gal that presented was from Murray County, southern Minnesota. And this is all free. They have classroom, agricultural, every single thing from your clothing to the food you eat to trees to food production to gardening. They have free virtual classes that they share and free flyers and magazines and newspapers. You can either get them virtually. I mean, it was really, they were such good presenters, and I just thought, God, this is really, really cool. So if you get a chance, watch that one. It was Virtual Opportunities, Agriculture in the Classroom. It's a whole literacy thing. It's standards-based. So they might already, the district might be tuned into it. K-12.
I just emailed Erin,
Great.
we'll connect tomorrow.
Good. You can send her that.
Yeah. Well,
No, you can't send her the link.
No, but I could log in on my own.
You could log in and watch it, right. So that's pretty much it. Like you guys said, it was certainly different not being in person, but I know how hard the MSBA staff has worked at putting this together. It was not an easy task. They've had pretty good, really good attendance. I think the first day we had like 1,200 or something. So it
No
was good.
cupcakes at lunch, though.
No cupcakes at lunch.
But I did make grilled cheese and tomato soup after Mary Catherine Rickard said, "What are we having for lunch?" I did.
Do you know what everybody said they were making for supper the first Thursday after Phyllis, what's her name, Frierson talked? Everybody went home and made tater tot hot.
Oh, she talked about that. Yep.
Yeah. So this week is the last one. It starts at 8 o'clock with some round tables and stuff, and then I pass the gavel to Mike Dolman, who will be president for the next 2 years. I will be past president with him this year, working with him, so, yeah. And Lunch and Learn, I believe, is gonna be an open discussion, that it's gonna be a format where you can interact with other board members. I don't think it's gonna be a formal presenter, so, should be good. So with that, thank you all. Have a good night.